Okay, so good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining me on the planet. My name is June Allen. I am a racial trauma therapist and I am the founder of The Art of Greatness at juneallen.net. So today I want to talk to you. It was a question that somebody asked me yesterday, one of the ladies in my group. And she was asking me about what it means to... Hi, Rose! Thanks for joining. She was asking me about how to trust yourself. What does it mean to trust yourself? And she was talking about... because I was sharing about how we all have a different ecosystem internally. I think I've shared about this quite a lot. And she was saying, well, how do you trust that the parts that are internal are not just your inner critic, or, how do you know which parts are your authentic self is the question. So today I really want to talk to you and just share some tools and stuff like that, that you can begin to use it as part of your self-care practice that are going to help you learn how to trust yourself and understand what it means to trust yourself. Okay, but before we get into that, I'm just going to share a few, for those of you that don't know me, that don't know anything about me. So as I said, I'm a racial trauma therapist. I'm also a business coach. I'm a retreat facilitator. What else do I do? I'm a soon-to-be author. What else? There's quite a few different things that I do. But yeah, I also run a membership as well. I run an online wellness mastermind. And at the moment we're focusing on financial therapy, which is great. Good. I had a really good session yesterday. Just talking about hoarding and just talking about hoarding and are you stingy with yourself, and how it comes from fear and all of that kind of stuff. So actually this kind of relates to this topic that I'm going to be talking about today. So if there's anything at all that I say in this live stream that you want to get more information about, you can click the link in my bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net, and you'll find all the information that you need. There's if you want to work with me, if you want to join the wellness membership, if you want to work with me one-on-one, if you want to book me for any events or anything like that, all of that information you can find in the link in the bio. So I also need to let you know about my half-day retreat that is happening on the 15th of July. Okay, Saturday the 15th of July. There's going to be two workshops over the course of half a day from 10 till 2. The first one is going to be it's called The Art of Receiving. Okay, the retreat is called The Art of Receiving. The first one, we're going to be looking at your relationship to receiving. What are the blocks that stop you receiving? We're going to be looking at receiving energy. What is receiving energy? How to raise your vibration, all of that good stuff. And then the second workshop, what we're going to do in the afternoon, is going to be focused more around money. So we're going to be exploring your relationship to money. What is money trauma? What is money shame? All of these different things that kind of block us from our ability to receive as black women. So if you're interested in joining me for that retreat, then you can click the link in the bio and you can find all of the details about how you can do that. Okay, so now let's get into the content. So how to trust yourself. Okay, how to trust ourselves. So the first thing that I would say is, before you can learn to trust yourself, you've got to understand why you don't trust yourself in the first place. Okay, what have been the things that have happened to you that have made you be put in a position where you can't trust yourself? Now, obviously, living under systems of oppression is set up for us to be able to do that. Because if we don't trust ourselves, if we don't trust who we are, if we don't trust our intuition, it means that we're always going to be looking externally. Okay, we're always going to be looking externally for validation. So if the system tells us that we have to behave a certain type of way, or that we are rewarded for being a certain type of way, then and we are rewarded for not trusting ourselves. We're rewarded for doing what's expected of us, to not complaining about our pain, and not calling people out when racism and stuff like that happens. So when we think about the impact of oppression, whether it is we're talking about it systemically, or even within your family, maybe there were certain toxic rules and stuff in your family of origin that you had to abide by. Okay, and that means not trusting yourself. You have to just do as you're told. You have to just have this blind compliance, and this happens systemically and within families. Okay, if the systems that you were raised in, the family system that you were raised in, said that you're not allowed to, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, and it's quite often, in forms of abuse and stuff like that as well, that is going to make you not trust yourself. And whether it's physical or emotional, sometimes the emotional abuse is worse actually in terms of being able to trust yourself, because with the gaslighting, oh, what are you saying that for, that didn't really happen, why are you getting emotional, and you just sort of having to second guess yourself the whole time. That is going to have an impact on you being able to trust yourself, because externally what they want is for you to be able to make sure that they can control you at all times. Whether it's systemically or the relationship, they're going to demand that you are going to be vulnerable enough so that you are controlled at all times. Okay, which means that over time you're not going to trust yourself. You're not going to trust yourself, because that's how you've been raised. You've been raised not to think about anything internally. Everything has to be external. So you're constantly looking for external validation. You're constantly hyper vigilant and making sure that the people that are around you are not going to harm you. When you're constantly in that state, you're not going to have any self-esteem. You're not going to have any self-esteem. It's going to be very, very difficult for you to have any self-esteem if you're around that energy all the time without any sort of awareness. If you don't have any awareness, if you're not having conversations about it, okay, you're going to be behaving that way unconsciously without realizing it. So the way that you learn to start trusting yourself is you first have to recognize how systems of oppression have destroyed your ability to trust yourself. And quite often, I've said this in a few live streams over the last few days about how, again, we have that ecosystem of parts within us. And at the core, there's a sacred part of ourselves, the part of us that is connected to God, nature, higher power, goddess, however you identify. Okay, that sacred part of yourself that's at your core, okay, that is the part of you that knows how to trust. But because of all of our experiences, living under systems of oppression, maybe growing up in families where you were neglected or abused or whatever, all of that rubble is on top of all of this, on top of your sacred self, your sacred core. So you can't trust yourself. You can't trust yourself because you've had so much stuff happen to you that you've lost the ability to be connected to that part of yourself. So the work around learning to trust yourself is about allowing yourself to take the actions, so that you can find yourself way back home to yourself, to that core part of yourself. Okay, so it involves, when you start to become aware of let's go back to the parts conversation. Okay, if you start to become aware of the different parts of you, that's a really good place to start, because you might be aware of your inner critic. Okay, the part of you that's always criticizing you, always cussing you out, always saying that you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, all that part of you is going to make sure that you don't trust yourself, because it's always going to be second guessing you. So that part of you might be an internalized parent that was very critical. That part of you also might be an internalized oppressor. Okay, that part of you that identifies with systems of oppression. So it could be your inner racist, or your inner the part of you that doesn't like women. Internalized misogyny. Living under systems of oppression means that we may well internalize all of these toxic things without realizing. So all of those things are going to erode your sense of self. Okay, they're going to erode your sense of self, and you're not going to be able to trust yourself. So you have to start having more awareness around those parts that are attacking you. You have to have more awareness around the parts of you that are attacking you. And it's about being also being conscious of the part. There is a part of you that wants to challenge those parts that are being mean to you. And sometimes, here's one of the good things about being in a group or being in therapy and stuff like that, is that when you have a therapist or you're in a group that won't allow you to talk to yourself that way, okay, or when you have a group or therapist that is modeling more self-compassion, and positive self-talk and more self-acceptance and stuff like that, okay, then the part of you, that sacred part of you that is going to be your ally, that is going to stick up for you, okay, maybe that's your inner father or inner mother, okay, it will start to have a different type of relationship with those parts that are being mean to you. So the sacred part of you begins to rise up. When you start to be in other places, in groups or with your therapist or whatever, that is showing you that positive more behavior, that behavior and self-acceptance, you then start to internalize that. You then start to internalize and mirror those behaviors, and you start to question those parts that are being mean to you and going, okay, actually no, that I don't think like that about myself. And I know this is going to sound really strange, because you then can start to talk to those parts that are being mean to you. You can begin to silence those parts that are being mean to you, and you start to also understand that those parts are not necessarily you. Again, like I said, it might be internalized from the systems of oppression. It could be internalized parent, or an internalized, you internalized dad, or whatever it is. But those parts are not part of your sacred self. And so when you start to have a more of a you start to nurture that part of you, that sacred part of you, that part of you starts to grow, seed and grow, then you can start to pull out the weeds, the inner critic, the internalized system, the whatever it is, the shaming that might come from religion or whatever it is. There's that as well. Religion can sometimes be quite internally abusive, actually, telling you that you're not good enough, that you're sinful, that you're unworthy, that you shouldn't be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that, and all of the dogma that sometimes comes with some of these religious organizations or practices or whatever. They can be quite dogmatic and be quite shaming. So you end up not feeling, you don't trust yourself again, because you have to externalize it. And again, that's another form of control. That's another form of external control. You abandon yourself so that they can control you. You abandon yourself so that the system and whatever can control you. And being able to trust yourself is giving yourself permission to really be clear about what you want. To really start being clear about what you want and what you need. You have to start listening to yourself, understanding what your needs are, and start really paying attention to that. So that means finding yourself a space to get quiet. When you do your when you do your work on your own at home, your self-care work, you spend time in solitude. Spend time in solitude every day, even if it's 5 minutes, just to check in with yourself. What do you need today? How are you feeling? Is there anything bothering you? What does peace look like for you? Do you need support? Do you need to go and talk to anyone? Do you need to rest? Do you need to go and sleep? Do you need to eat? You ask yourself all of these questions, just like you would. It's just the same as when you're building trust with another human, but with another person. If you were building trust with another person, what is the criteria for that? The criteria for building trust with another person is, does that person show up for you? Does that person say and do what they say that they're going to do? And ask yourself those questions of yourself. Do you show up for yourself when you need to show up? Or do you just you don't bother doing it? You might promise yourself, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to have this for lunch, or I'm going to go and exercise today, or whatever. Do you just kind of I can't be bothered, I'm not going to do it? It's easy, when you're in a group or when you're with somebody else, to kind of for them to hold you accountable for different things. But do you hold yourself accountable for things? Because in order for you to really start to trust yourself, you have to start showing up for yourself, whether there's somebody else that's going to be accountable for you or not. When you start to really show up for yourself and speaking up for yourself, that can sometimes be one of the hardest things about doing this work. Learning how to speak up for yourself. And really being your own ally. being your biggest champion to yourself. When other people and living under the system has been, consistently telling you that you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, the list goes on about you not being enough of this, that and the other. When you're told that externally, okay, the narrative internally often mirrors all of that. So if you want to start to rebuild the relationship to yourself, you have to start challenging those parts of yourself that are regurgitating that narrative. You got to start showing up for yourself. Just like a friend would show up for you. Your friend would say, "Don't talk to her like that. Don't talk to her like that. Have some respect." And you have to start having that internal conversation with those parts that were really about the other people. You have to start having that conversation with those parts of you that you've internalized from others, whether it's systemically or individually. You start after having conversations with yourself, those parts that are trying to keep you small, that are trying to keep you down. And this is an important part of doing this work, because a lot of times, we don't realize how much stuff we've internalized. We don't realize how much we're repeating the stuff that other people have said that we are. How we've internalized stuff that external people have said to us, what people have said to us. We've believed the lies that people have told about us. We've believed the stereotypes that the system says we are. We believe that, we internalize it, and we don't question it, because a lot of it is unconscious. A lot of it is unconscious. So trusting yourself means having those honest conversations. Why is it that I think like that about myself? And what do I really want for myself? What are people saying about me? Is it the truth? 9 times out of 10 it ain't the truth. Okay? And what is it that you want to feel about yourself? What is the truth about yourself? What is the truth about how you feel about certain things? And what do you need? And then you start making decisions from that place. You start making decisions from that place. And you make decisions about yourself from a place of love, as opposed to, I need to please that person. I'm less worried about hurting myself and pleasing the other person. That has to be switched. You have to start thinking about actually what's right for me. Yes, it might upset the other person. It doesn't mean that you're going to be rude to other people. It's not about that. It's about allowing yourself to be clear about your boundaries and putting yourself first, rather than what other people say that you should be doing. That's how you start to trust yourself, and that's how you start to build your self-confidence. Self-confidence is not arrogance, it's not grandiosity, it's not any of that. Self-confidence is about you taking care of yourself and putting yourself first. And at a basic level, not allowing people to take the piss out of you. At a basic level, you're not allowing people to take the piss out of you. That's where the self-respect comes in. And a lot of us don't respect ourselves because we've been raised in an environment and in a society that again, in order for them to control us, we have to disrespect ourselves. We have to abandon ourselves. That's where we've learnt it. Our bodies don't belong to us. Our mind doesn't belong to us. Our thinking doesn't belong to us. Because under these systems, and quite often in families that have been abusive, okay, none of that stuff is allowed. Because when it comes to being in control and having power over somebody else, the demands are you're not allowed to have a sense of self. You just got to do as you're told and shut up and get on with it. So trusting yourself means that you have to be on a process, you have to be on a journey of reclaiming that part of yourself, of finding that part of yourself, of owning that part of yourself, and giving yourself permission to say no to other people that are making these demands on you, that you abandon yourself, that you deny yourself. You have to allow them people to be upset, and people will get upset. People will get upset because they're not used to you standing up for yourself. Why people will get upset when you start, telling them that you're not going to put up with their nonsense, or that you're choosing not to let them treat you like a mule, or that you're not going to allow them to come and touch your hair and put their hands on you any type of way. These are all things that, you know, when you start doing this work and you start putting these boundaries in, yes, it's going to feel uncomfortable at first. It will feel uncomfortable because people are not used to you being like that, and white people are not used to black people having boundaries. They're not used to it because, you know, history has taught us that white people have had access to black bodies for centuries. They've had access to black bodies for centuries. That's why they find it they think it's okay to come and touch your hair, to come and touch your children and whatnot, because they've had access to our bodies for centuries. They're not, and we're not used to saying no either, because we're used to other people having access to our bodies, even if it doesn't work for us. We allow people to have access to our bodies because we're disconnected from our bodies, and we don't know how to say no. Until I started doing, I didn't even know what a boundary was until I actually until I went into recovery. I was listening to people. I remember my sponsor talking about it, and I was thinking to myself, what is she talking about? What's a boundary? And then she started talking about all different types of boundaries, and I was like, oh, okay, I didn't even know that even that was a thing. So I was a big woman before I understood what a boundary is. And then as I started doing this work, I started talking about more the concept of racial boundaries. Okay, racial boundaries are, you know, the limits that you put around your culture and who you are as a black woman, as a black person. So an example of a racial boundary is the hair conversation. You're not letting anybody come and touch your hair. Okay, that's a racial boundary. Another example of a racial boundary might be that you don't want to talk to, maybe you don't want to talk to people at work. Okay, maybe you don't want to talk to white folk at work about black issues that come up in the media. Maybe that's a boundary for you. You don't want to talk to white folk, okay, about black issues that come up in social media. Because, you know, sometimes you go to work or whatever and people want to chit chat around the coffee machine or whatever. Oh, isn't it terrible that this, that and the other happened? You know, maybe you don't want to have those conversations with them. Maybe it's not safe for you to have those conversations with them. That's an example of a racial boundary. And sometimes those things are important, but you have to decide where your boundaries are, and that's how you start to build trust with yourself. That's how you build confidence, by making those by exploring it first, okay? Because the system will have you just wanting to mollycoddle the other person. If it's a white person at work, maybe you end up getting into conversation with them about race. You don't really want to, but you feel like you have to, because you don't want to upset the other. You don't want to upset the white person. But when you feel confident in yourself, you can say to them, you know, thanks for your concern, but I don't really want to talk about it. I don't really want to talk about it, and that's okay. And then leave them with their feelings. Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. Leave them with their feelings. Let them get on with it. But you protect yourself. You protect your own well-being. That's what racial boundary is. That's what it means to trust yourself. And when you start doing that stuff, internally, there's a shift that begins to happen. There's a strength that starts to build inside when you start to have those types of conversations. First and foremost with yourself. When you're clear about what you will and won't talk about, what you will and won't tolerate, okay, you start to trust yourself. You start to feel more confident in yourself, because you know what your values are. You know where your boundaries are, because you're listening to yourself and you're honouring yourself. You're honouring your needs. As the layers come off, and you start to really understand who you are, your identity starts to come through. And this is all the work that we do in, that I work with clients in either one-to-one or in the group as well. The layers will start to come off, and if you're in a group setting, that can also be a very powerful way to build your confidence, because you start to talk about things as a group, you start to identify with things as a group, and you end up holding each other as a group. There's a shared understanding around certain things, and people will say things, somebody else will identify, maybe somebody else will share back, oh my god, I feel like that, you know, and there's a shared understanding, and there's a group confidence that's then built. And when you begin to internalize that because of what you learned in the group or in therapy, you can take that and practice that out in the real world. And that's how you build up your emotional reps. That's how you build up your reps. Okay? You're never really going to trust yourself or be confident in yourself if you don't practice those things. You can understand those things intellectually, but if you're not actively practicing it, you're never going to really be able to trust yourself, because you're not actually taking action on that thing that you need to practice. So being kind to yourself, really understanding what your needs are and stuff is really, really important. You know, is really, really important. And sometimes there will be those protective parts that come up. The parts that are like, you know, that are trying to protect you from being vulnerable. The parts that, you know, it might come across as people pleasing or whatever, but also what's going on internally is that part is trying to protect you from the pain, or maybe the shame, or maybe whatever, the hurt that you might feel from the other person's reaction. You know, so there will be those protective parts that still might be trying to hold you back from really standing in your values and what you need and all of that kind of stuff, because it takes time. So what I'll do in therapy and in the groups and stuff like that is get people to kind of really understand what those protective parts are afraid of, and what those protective parts are trying to teach you, what they're trying to keep you safe from. And you take your time, and you do this thing gently over time. You take little baby steps, and you gradually widen that window of tolerance. So it's like exercising a muscle. You gradually widen that window of tolerance, so that over time you kind of get used to it, and you get used to saying no to people. You get used, when you say no to other people, you remember this, when you say no to other people, you're saying yes to yourself. Okay? When you say no to other people and their nonsense, you're saying yes to yourself. And a lot of us hold a lot of, I know for me, I've held on to a lot of resentment, okay, because I didn't know how to say no. But when I started learning how to say no, every time I say no to somebody else about something and saying yes to myself, there's an internal shift that happens that builds my confidence, that builds my self-esteem, where I trust myself that little bit more. Because I'm learning how to say yes to myself and no to others, and detaching from however they might respond. Not because I don't care, but because how they feel about certain things when I'm setting a boundary, that ain't my business. Especially if that person is being abusive, or especially if that person is being gaslighting you, or being disrespectful. If that person is being disrespectful, not honouring your boundaries, and just doing what they want, and you need to say, you know, practicing saying no is an important part of you building your self-esteem, building your self-respect, trusting yourself. And over time, you'll kind of start to walk a little bit different. You'll start to show up a little bit different, because internally you're really starting to honour that core part of yourself. And the inner critic and stuff, they're still there. My inner critic is still there sometimes, but I understand what it's there for. I understand why it's there, and sometimes I know it's a part that doesn't belong to me. Sometimes I know it's an internalized part from, it's come from the outside. It's not a part of me. It's an internalized. Quite often it's an oppressed part. It's my inner racist trying to tell me that I'm not good enough, and who do I think I am as a black woman saying that? You should be a mule. You need to keep quiet. You need to be silent and get on with it. You need to stop complaining. All of that stuff that my internalized oppressor will tell me, all of those things, that I'm not allowed to have a voice. But I can acknowledge that it's there, and I'm just going to tell it to sit down, because I'm going to open my mouth anyway and say what I need to say. But it's taken me a long time to get to this place where I can acknowledge that that's a part of me that I've internalized, but I don't have to act on it, and I don't do anything that it says now. It will speak up and say things, but I don't act on it, because I'm confident enough and I trust myself enough to know that what I know what I need. the last thing that I'll say, actually, just to wrap up this session, and what came up in the conversation that the person was asking me about how to trust himself is, you know, she was saying about, well, how do you know that the part that is speaking is your sacred part? How do you know it's that part? How do you know if you're making the right decision about certain things? And I'll share my experience around that. And the way that I know that I'm making the right decision about something is I'll get quiet. And I'll allow myself just to think about the question. Think about the question or the incident or the experience or whatever. And I'll ask that part. I'll ask that sacred core part of me, you know, what's the next step? What do I need to do? Give me the right answer. And I'll close my eyes and I'll allow myself just to go inward and just think and just allow myself to be. And quite often I'll get the answer that I need. And the reason that I know that it's come from that sacred part of myself is because I don't feel any resistance around the answer. When I allow that part of me to think about it, even if it's a difficult answer that maybe I don't even want to hear, there's something like a sense of stillness that I will feel around the answer that feels like the right thing to do. And there's a stillness and a peace that comes with that answer. You know, and sometimes the other parts will start jumping up and down and be like, oh my God, I can't, you've got to do that. And what about if this you know, and all of my other parts start jumping up and down. Because I might be scared about taking the action. The answer that I get from the place of stillness is not always the answer. This the easiest answer. Quite often it's the most difficult thing that I have to do. Sometimes it's the thing that I don't want to do because I know it's going to be a challenge. I don't want to do that thing because I know that it's going to be a challenge. However, if it comes from that sacred part of me and there's a sense of peace that I'm feeling around that answer, even though I know that the other parts of me be jumping up and down because I might be scared about doing it, and what about this and what about that and how and all, but the how is none of my business. I just need to connect with that sacred part for what the answer is, and then I need to be obedient to that part. I need to take action based on what that part is. So if you're struggling with if I don't feel peace around it, it means that I'm not ready for the answer yet. So maybe I'll come back tomorrow. You know, when I do my meditation the next day, maybe I'll go back and think about it. But I also have a box as well. I have like a wooden box. It's called my God box or Goddess box. And if there's something that's bothering me, if there's something that I don't know the answer to, whatever, I'll just write it on a post-it note and put it inside the box and leave it in the box. Sometimes I'll do that, and then I'll go back, you know, because not everything's in my control. If it's something that's it's beyond my control and I really can't figure out how to deal with this specific thing, I'll just write it down and put it in the box. I'll just go, do you know what? I'm handing it to my ancestors. I'm handing it to my higher power. I'm handing it to Goddess, my art, whatever, however you identify, because I don't know what to do. So I'll just put it in that box. And then, you know, sometimes I'll forget about it and I'll go back a couple of weeks later and go, oh, actually, that was alright, how I dealt with that, or I handled it okay. But sometimes I need to, you know, going inward and just connecting with that part of myself. And we all have it. Just to kind of get clear with myself around, okay, well, this is what I need to do. This is what feels in my spirit the right thing to do. And then I just, you know, and then I make decisions based on that core feeling that I have about that thing, about that experience or whatever. And then I go from there. And again, that's something that I've had to learn over time about, and that's how I trust myself, how I've learned to trust myself, by trusting that thing. And 9 times out of 10, if I go against the answer that I've got from my sacred self, I always get in trouble. It's always trouble. Some drama happens or some sort of chaos happens when I don't listen to myself, when I don't pay attention to what's going on. Something always happens. So I've learned over time to be more discerning and to stop trying to control things, and to listen to that part of myself and just say, you know, stop going around the houses trying to avoid what I need to be doing, and just focus on the thing that you know that your higher power and that sacred part of myself has told me to get on with it. You know, and when I lean into it, if I lean into that thing, yes, it's going to be difficult. Yes, sometimes it's hard. I have to, you know, I have to show up in a different way sometimes. Again, I get all the growing pains that comes with it, but it always works out. It always works out good when I listen to that part of myself and I take action on what I need to do. So again, this is another way that we start to build trust with ourselves. So I hope that you found that really helpful. So yeah, if you've got any other questions or anything that you want me to talk about, please drop them in the comments, or you can send me an email or send me a DM, and you can email me info@yardofgreatness.com. If you want to join me for the Art of Receiving retreat, which is on the 15th of July, you can click the link in my bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. So this was number 28, I think, of the 30 live streams in 30 days. It's been quite a journey. So if you've missed some of the live streams I've done in the past, you know, if you go to my if you click the link in my bio, there's a direct link that will take you through all the 30 live streams, and then you can, you know, I've talked about so many different things, and it's been quite a good ride. So tomorrow is the last kind of, I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, we'll see what happens, but then Sunday is I'm just going to talk about, you know, what I've learned from doing these 30 live streams in 30 days, and just let you know how I'm going to do moving forward. There's quite a few changes I'm going to make from doing this, because I thought it's been really good for me to do it. I've built a lot of, you know, solid relationships. I've got new clients out of it, which is great. You know, people have learned a lot. I've had a lot of great feedback from people, just, you know, be really grateful for me just kind of sharing, you know, just adding value to people, you know, and answering people's questions and stuff like that. So people have got a lot out of it, which has been really good for me. Just to know that I'm, you know, just adding value to people's lives and stuff like that, talking about therapy and whatever. So yeah, thank you so much for joining, and I will see you tomorrow. All right, take care. Bye bye.